Step into the 1970s, a time when everyday homes were filled with hidden dangers nobody thought twice about. From lead paint and asbestos to toxic cleaners and unsafe heaters. Many household items we now consider extremely dangerous were once completely normal. In this video, we uncovered 20 shocking things that were in nearly every home in the 1970s, and why they would never be allowed today. You'll discover how past safety standards or lack of them put families at risk, how children grew up around serious hazards, and how modern rules were born from decades of accidents and hard lessons learned. If you love nostalgia, history, and eye-opening comparisons between then and now, this video will surprise you from start to finish. Let's start with the walls themselves. In the 1970s, many homes were covered in a silent threat: lead-based paint. It was on the walls, the windowsills, the furniture, and even children's toys. As this paint aged, it would chip and turn into dust, which kids would inevitably inhale or ingest. The devastating effects of lead poisoning on a child's developing brain and nervous system were not widely understood by the public, making this colorful coating one of the most pervasive dangers of the era. Regulations eventually banned it for residential use, but for a generation of children, the damage was already done. Tucked away behind those lead-painted walls was another invisible killer: asbestos. Hailed as a miracle material for its fire-resistant and insulating properties, asbestos was everywhere. It was in ceiling tiles, floor tiles, pipe insulation, and even inside appliances like hair dryers and toasters. For decades, no one connected the microscopic fibers to the deadly lung diseases, including mesothelioma, that would appear years later. Families lived and breathed in this hazardous material, completely unaware that their home's safety features were slowly poisoning them from the inside out. Inside these homes, the air was often thick with a different kind of pollutant: indoor cigarette smoke. Ashtrays were a standard decorative item in every room, from the living room, coffee table, to the bedside stand. Smoking was not just common. It was a social ritual performed everywhere, with no thought given to non-smokers or children. The concept of secondhand smoke being harmful was still years away from public consciousness. Windows were often kept closed, trapping the smoke and creating a toxic environment that today would be considered an unimaginable health hazard for a family. If a child managed to avoid the lead, asbestos, and smoke, there were still dangers lurking in the bathroom. Medicine cabinets were rarely secured with child-proof locks. They were often filled with a variety of potent, adult-strength prescriptions, from painkillers to sedatives, all stored in easy-to-open bottles. For a curious child, this cabinet was an accessible treasure chest of colorful pills that looked like candy. The lack of basic safety precautions meant that accidental poisonings were a tragically common occurrence, a stark contrast to the locked boxes and safety caps that are standard today. Another seemingly innocent feature posed a grave risk: window cords. The long, dangling cords and loops on blinds and curtains were a fixture in 1970s homes. While adults saw them as a simple mechanism for adjusting light, these cords were a serious strangulation hazard for small children. Countless accidents occurred when kids became entangled while playing near windows, leading to a complete redesign of window coverings in the decades that followed. What was once a standard design feature is now recognized as a critical safety failure. Electrical outlets were another common household feature that lacked modern safety considerations. There were no childproof covers, no tamper-resistant designs, just open slots, perfectly sized for a child's curious fingers or a misplaced metal object. Electrical shocks were a frighteningly frequent part of growing up. Most parents simply taught their kids to stay away, but the inherent danger was built into the very walls of the home, waiting for a moment of unsupervised curiosity. During cold winters, families often relied on portable space heaters for extra warmth, but 1970s models were a far cry from the safe, auto shut-off units of today. They typically featured exposed red-hot heating elements with minimal guarding. These heaters were notorious fire starters, easily igniting a nearby curtain, rug, or piece of furniture. They also posed a severe burn risk to anyone who accidentally touched or fell against them, turning a quest for comfort into a serious household hazard. Underneath the kitchen sink, another danger was brewing. Household cleaners were incredibly potent and often contained highly toxic chemicals like ammonia and chlorine, sold without any of the warning labels or safety information we expect now. Even worse, they were stored in simple bottles with easy-to-remove screw caps, making them readily accessible to children. The idea of safety caps was not yet widespread, and countless poisonings resulted from kids getting into these corrosive and poisonous substances. The kitchen itself held other risks. Gas stoves were common, but many homes lacked proper ventilation systems like range hoods. This meant that byproducts of gas combustion, including dangerous carbon monoxide, could quietly build up inside the home. Families cooked daily meals without realizing they were potentially exposing themselves to a colorless, odorless gas that could cause serious health issues or even death. It was a silent threat that emanated from the very heart of the home. The furniture that filled these rooms was also a source of danger. In the 1970s, fire safety standards for furniture and carpets were minimal. Many items were made from highly flammable synthetic materials that would go up in flames in an instant. Furthermore, the flame-retardant chemicals used to treat some of these materials were later found to be toxic themselves, creating a no-win situation where the solution was almost as hazardous as the problem. Beyond flammability, the furniture itself was often unstable. Heavy, top-heavy televisions sat precariously on wobbly stands, and tall bookcases or dressers were rarely anchored to the wall. These pieces of furniture were tipping hazards, posing a deadly risk to small children who might try to climb them. The simple, life-saving practice of securing heavy furniture was not common knowledge, leading to preventable tragedies. Style often trumped safety in 1970s design, and this was evident in the furniture's construction. Sharp metal edges and hard, unforgiving corners were common features on coffee tables, end tables, and other pieces. These sleek, modernist designs looked great but were brutal on the receiving end of a fall. For toddlers learning to walk, these sharp edges were a constant source of cuts, bruises, and head injuries. The soft, rounded corners we see in family-friendly furniture today are a direct response to the hazards of that era. When someone got a fever, out came the mercury thermometer. These glass thermometers were a staple in every family's first aid kit. The danger, however, was in how easily they could break, releasing the small ball of liquid mercury inside. In the 70s, people were fascinated by the silvery liquid, often letting children play with it, unaware that mercury is a potent neurotoxin. Spills were cleaned up casually, without any of the hazardous material protocols that are now required. Backyard fun also had a surprisingly dangerous edge. Lawn darts, also known as jarts, were a popular family game. These were large, heavy darts, with sharp metal tips, designed to be thrown high into the air, toward a target on the ground. Despite being marketed as a game for all ages, they were essentially weighted projectiles. After numerous injuries and several tragic child deaths caused by errant throws, they were eventually banned. But for a while, they were a standard part of many family barbecues. Even something as simple as a plastic bag was a hidden danger. In the 1970s, there was little public awareness about the suffocation risks plastic bags posed to young children. They were used freely for everything, and kids often played with them, putting them over their heads in games of make-believe. The warning labels we now see printed on every bag are a direct result of the heartbreaking accidents that taught society a hard lesson about this everyday item. For the curious child, the basement or garage was a workshop of wonders and dangers. Power tools, saws, and other equipment were often left unlocked and easily accessible. A child could wander in and find a world of sharp objects and powerful machinery to explore. The modern concept of keeping such items securely locked away from children was not a priority for many households, putting kids at risk of serious injury. It wasn't just power tools, it was science itself. Home chemistry kits were a popular educational toy, but they were a world away from the safe kitchen chemistry sets of today. These kits contained real chemicals, including acids, solvents, and powdered metals. They came with alcohol burners for heating substances in glass test tubes. While they were intended to spark an interest in science, they also gave children unsupervised access to materials that could cause burns, create toxic fumes, or even start fires. A simple bath could also be surprisingly hazardous. Hot water heaters were often set to extremely high temperatures, sometimes as high as 140 degrees Fahrenheit or more. At that temperature, water can cause a third-degree burn in just a few seconds. Without the anti-scald devices and regulated temperature settings common today, children and adults were at constant risk of severe burns from the tap. The very electrical system of the house was often a hidden liability. In many older 1970s homes, the wiring was not properly grounded. This fundamental safety feature, which protects against electrical surges and reduces the risk of shock, was often missing or installed incorrectly. This oversight dramatically increased the risk of electrocution and electrical fires, turning the entire home's power grid into a ticking time bomb. Finally, in the event that any of these hazards did cause a fire, most homes were woefully unprepared. Fire safety equipment was minimal. Smoke detectors were not yet mandatory and were a rare sight in the average home. Fire extinguishers were even rarer. Families were living surrounded by flammable materials, faulty wiring, and unsafe heaters, with virtually no early warning system or means to fight a small blaze before it grew into a catastrophe. That home chemistry kit, containing real acids and flammable materials, was considered a perfectly safe and educational toy for children at the time. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more forgotten history and retro life deep dives.